You're kneeling in a shallow cave in what is now southwestern France, roughly 40,000 years ago. In front of you lies the body of an old man, his joints worn smooth, most of his teeth long gone, the kind of frailty that should have killed him years earlier. Someone kept him alive anyway. Now he's gone, and your hands are already moving, digging a pit into the cave floor, wide enough, deep enough on purpose. You are not human, not the species that will one day call itself that. You are a Neanderthal, and you're about to do something scientists spent a century arguing you were incapable of. Today, when someone you love dies, there's a process, a funeral home, a plot, or an urn. Maybe flowers, maybe a favorite song, maybe just people standing quietly in a room together. It feels obvious, natural, like something humans have simply always done. It wasn't obvious. It wasn't guaranteed. And for most of the 20th century, scientists assumed only fully modern humans were even capable of it. So when did early humans first start deliberately burying their dead? And what does the evidence actually prove? Once you strip away a century of assumptions? In 1908, two French clergymen dug up a Neanderthal skeleton at a site called La Chapelle-aux-Saints, and archaeologists argued about it for more than 100 years afterward. Was he deliberately buried? Or did he just die in a hole, and the sediment did the rest? In 2013, archaeologist William Rondeau led a 12-year excavation back at that same cave, using modern taphonomic analysis, the science of how bodies decay and settle over time. His team studied the pit itself, the pattern of the bones, the way the skeleton had stayed anatomically connected instead of scattering the way an exposed body naturally does. Their conclusion, published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences: the pit was dug by hands, not by nature, and the body was covered quickly, deliberately on purpose. Rondeau put it simply afterward: whatever the reason, ritual or practical, this discovery closed some of the distance between them and us. So Neanderthals buried their dead. But how exactly? In 1960, archaeologist Ralph Seletsky excavated a Neanderthal skeleton at Shanidar Cave in Iraqi Kurdistan, Shanidar 4. Soil samples taken from directly beneath the bones came back full of pollen clumps, and palynologist Arlette Leroy-Gurin concluded, in 1975, that Neanderthals had laid their dead to rest on a bed of wildflowers. For decades, that became the single most famous image in Neanderthal archaeology: a caveman funeral with flowers. Here's the twist. Everyone assumes that story is settled science. It isn't. In 2023, archaeologist Chris Hunt, at Liverpool John Moores University, went back to Shanidar and found fresh pollen clumps of his own, sitting right on the modern cave floor, nowhere near any burial. His conclusion, published in the Journal of Archaeological Science: solitary bees, nesting in the cave floor, may have produced those pollen clusters all along. Not flowers, bees. But Hunt didn't debunk the burial itself. What he found even more striking was something Seletsky had barely mentioned. Several Neanderthal skeletons at Shanidar were clustered together, in the same spot, facing the same direction, generation after generation. That's not an accident. That's tradition. But burial wasn't only about where a body went. Sometimes, it was about what went with it. Fast forward to 1955. Near the city of Vladimir in Russia, Soviet archaeologist Otto Bader uncovered a burial complex now known as Sungir, and inside it, a skeleton roughly 34,000 years old, wearing more than 3,500 ivory beads sewn into clothing that had long since rotted away. Experimental archaeologists who tried recreating those beads by hand found that each one took close to an hour to carve from mammoth tusk using stone tools. Do the math, and the ornaments on that single skeleton represent thousands of hours of collective labor. An entire community's worth of winters spent carving beads for a body that would never wear them again in life. This wasn't just a burial. It was a statement. Somebody, or some group of somebodies, decided a dead body deserved thousands of hours most people would otherwise spend simply trying to survive. Here's where it gets strange. In 2023, paleoanthropologist Lee Berger and his team announced something that broke the entire timeline. Deep inside South Africa's Rising Star cave system, they'd found the remains of Homo naledi, a small-brained, extinct human relative with a brain roughly a third the size of yours, arranged in shallow pits that Berger's team argued had been deliberately dug and refilled. If true, it would push the earliest known burial back to around 250,000 years ago, more than 100,000 years before either Neanderthals or modern humans are known to have done the same thing. Everyone assumes deliberate burial requires a big brain, language, complex culture. Homo naledi had none of the first, and probably not much of the other two. The catch? Plenty of scientists don't buy it. Researchers publishing critiques in journals including eLife and the Journal of Human Evolution have argued the cave floor could have shaped those pits naturally, with no digging required. As of now, this remains one of the most contested claims in all of paleoanthropology, a reminder that even proof of ancient burial is still being argued over bone by bone. So what's the real answer? Burial didn't start on one day, with one species in one cave. It happened in layers, some confirmed, some contested, some probably still buried in caves nobody has excavated yet. Neanderthals dug pits by hand. Sungir's community spent thousands of hours dressing a corpse nobody living would ever see again. Homo naledi might have beaten every one of them to it, by a margin of 100,000 years in total darkness, with a brain a third the size of yours. What connects all of it isn't the method. It's the refusal. The refusal to let a body just lie where it fell, disappear into weather and scavengers, become nothing. Somewhere in deep prehistory, something in us, or in whatever we were before we were fully us, decided a person shouldn't just vanish. Go back to that cave in southwestern France, 40,000 years ago. The pit is dug. The old man's body is lowered in, carefully, the way you'd lower something you didn't want broken. Soil falls over him, handful by handful, until he disappears from view. Nobody wrote his name down. No one alive today will ever know what he was called, who he loved, what he was afraid of. But somebody dug a hole for him anyway, on purpose by hand, when they didn't have to. That's the whole answer, buried under 100,000 years of arguments about brain size and pollen and pits. Long before humans had a word for grief, they already knew what to do with it.